We talked going into Thursday about how the Week 13 main slate set up as being one where there were almost too many good plays, in the sense that we had a hard time deciding whom we wanted to prioritize, where we wanted to go, whittling down our lists, and we were right, because Week 13 was a wild one. Massive, massive scores across the board, huge performances, and a lot to break down. So we're going to do today is go through the implications of all those points, what it means from a DFS perspective, from a strategy perspective, and then go through injuries, rule changes, and a look at the Week 14 main slate. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, points, Week 13. How you doing?
I'm good. Could always be a little bit better. Had some 2v2 swaps that cost me a little bit, mostly centering on George Kittle versus Foster Moreau. But the name of the game this week really was upside. And it's the thing we talk about a lot more now than ever, where, and, you know, I don't know, it always feels a little bit strange to talk about. Yeah, you want guys with upside. Like, yeah, we all know that. But really thinking things through and trying to figure out who has upside and why has been a big change to my process, and I know yours as well. This week, I think we had a lot of, scrolling through our player picks. I think a lot of stuff worked out for this week. Some of those picks were not necessarily like pivots or anything. They were pretty
bold to say Justin Jefferson might be good against the Lions. It's bold. We're going out on a limb there.
But the thing that I can kind of hang this one hat on is that we talked specifically about value at receiver and how sort of unlikely those guys are to have big games. And it seemed a little bit more viable to go with those mid-range running backs with great workloads, because we don't always get mid-range running backs with great workloads. We usually get mid-range running backs with questionable workloads. So even though I myself didn't really get to Jonathan Taylor at all. Yeah. I had a pretty solid week because of looking at the slate from an upside standpoint. And so I to answer your question, doing pretty well.
Yeah, and you said the Jonathan Taylor thing. That led to your victory in our head-to-head, which means you've clinched the season because I've sucked in that department. I jammed in JT with Michelle and Gibson, whereas you went with Jefferson, Kupp, and Keenan Allen. And I had Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin, like they were both fine, but having Kupp, Jefferson versus Odell made things pretty easily in your favor there. And I think that was the right way to play things in retrospect. I think that you handled that well. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about role changes and talk about scoring in just 1 second. But first, what better way to gear up for the weekend and to spice up your thirsty Thursday night football and with FanDuel and Captain Morgan, introducing Captain Morgan Thursday Night Pick'em, a completely free-to-play contest that gives you 4 chances to win a share of $10,000. Here's how it works. FanDuel fans will have the chance to answer 10 questions centered around both Captain Morgan, that Thursday's NFL matchup. Fans who answer the most questions correctly will be eligible to earn their share of that week's $10,000 cash prize. Thursday Night Football will kick off in just a couple of days, so head to FanDuel.com/CaptainMorganNFL and spice up your game day today. That contest will be posted on Tuesday. So if you're listening on Monday, can't get that now, but on Tuesday, go to FanDuel.com/CaptainMorganNFL. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. And don't forget to to spice up your game day with Captain Morgan. Okay, week 3 headlines here again, the points, because there were a lot of them here. And I think that for me, Brandon, I think that this is true. This discussion is true both in weeks like this, where cash lines were outrageous, and in weeks previously where the cash lines were a lot lower. Because let's say week 12, you get a 30-point game or a 40-point game from Leonard Fournette. You can mess up everywhere else in your lineup, so have a very good chance to cash. This week, you needed a 40-point game to hang, essentially. And so I think the key thing for me is that no matter how the slate breaks down, whether it winds up being a lower scoring slate or a higher scoring slate, identifying players with that upside is important because you want the guys who can help you cash even when everything else goes poorly across the entire week. And you want guys who can hang on slates like this. So I think to me, it just kind of is a justification of like the mindset we've had the past, I would say 2 years or so, where we are selling out for upside above all else. Is that a correct way to phrase that, do you think?
Yeah, and I think the thing that can get lost is like, yes, it sounds obvious you want guys with high ceilings, but I'm not sure that we all, and myself included, always understand who has a super high ceiling.
Yeah.
I used to think it was wide receivers with really high ADOTs, regardless of volume, telling myself that, 2 or 3 downfield targets, maybe one other target, getting like 5 targets, bunch of air yards was enough to make a huge difference. That's not really the case. You need total air yards. Of course, you need to catch passes and score and convert, but total air yards, which a lot of people, or at least some people, don't like total air yards are very, very important in terms of identifying true upside because it factors in downfield work and volume. So I used to have that issue. And with quarterback specifically, that's the other thing that kind of has been a big change. In years past, we've been able to replace big games at quarterback with lower salaried quarterbacks. That is like just straight up not the case anymore. This year, and I did this at like 8:45 this morning, so just bear with me. But this year, quarterbacks who are projected for at least 4 FanDuel points on, according to numberFire's projections, they've gotten to at least 25 FanDuel points at about a 15.5% rate. It's like the baseline of all quarterbacks who are projected for work. If you look at quarterbacks with at least a salary of 8,000 on the main slate, those guys have gotten there 32% of the time, so more than double. And the non-studs, so anyone who didn't have an 8 or 9 in front of their salary at quarterback, got there at 11%. It's still possible to have big games from lower salaried quarterbacks, but it's very evident that these run heavy and now like the Tom Brady's, the Matthew Staffords, like there are only a few guys who really can go out and throw for 350 and 3 or 4 touchdowns. So it's about kind of looking at every position each week, figuring out where we can exploit things, and then figuring out where the upside lies from there.
Yeah, and I think that, it may seem obvious to say that you need upside, but at the same time, so you posted the draft rates for this week already up on numberFire, and I'm looking through those right now. And there are some guys pretty high on the list who don't have upside relative to other guys available this week. Like if you use Myles Gaskin, that's okay. I want to make that very clear because like we're having this discussion for a reason. But like Myles Gaskin to me is someone who, when I had, Antonio Gibson, when I had Sonny Michelle, I know that like Jamal Williams didn't do great. His role was bad. It wound up being bad. But going in, Jamal Williams had a better ceiling projection than Myles Gaskin. And Myles Gaskin, even with all his options there, wound up being on 15% of rosters. So like, and again, if you use Myles Gaskin, that's totally okay. Like, that's fine. I understand how you got there. But like, I think that we can say these things while still seeing some inefficiencies in the way people play things, because guys who I don't view as having upside, and I could be wrong, still wind up carrying popularity. Like Rex Burke had only 2.3%, but like that's 2.3% you could have gone elsewhere. I think that to me is kind of what stands out, is there are still plays we'll make on guys who don't have upside. Like, I mean, Gardner Minshew's defensible because his salary is so low, and he was in a great matchup, but he was on 7% of rosters. Kirk Cousins, 8%. Derek Carr on 6%, even though he's losing some goal line work to Marcus Mariota. So, in Tua, I think Tua's fine, but like 4% on a week like this, that's kind of still a lot, given the way they're playing offense right now. So, yeah. I think we're still seeing players without ceilings wind up on a decent number of rosters. So, although we're saying, hey, you need to identify ceiling, people aren't doing that across the board. And I think that for me, if you talk about quarterbacks, for me at running back, the two pillars to ceilings are touchdowns and yards. Like that's the way you score points. That's very obvious, but people like Gaskin, don't have a lot of yardage upside. That was the key differentiator for me between Jamal Williams and Antonio Gibson and Sonny Michelle, is that touchdowns are harder to come by for the Lions. I think they scored like 29 this week or whatever. Touchdowns are harder to come by for them than they are for the Rams, for example. So I think that just thinking about, okay, does this player give me either big yardage upside or big touchdown upside? If you can't say yes to one of those, and definitively yes, preferably to both, it's going to be a situation where I think you want to deviate. I think that's the way I view it.
Yeah, and all that comes down to the word regret. Like,
yeah,
how, like and it's different than fear of missing out, because that means you don't like situations and you're playing someone because you hear other people talking about it, or you just are worried. But like, you got to think about the chance that you're going to regret not using certain players. And Myles Gaskin, similar salary to what he's had, same role as what he's had. He has never made us regret not using him. I like Myles Gaskin. I think he's a fun player. I think that, there are things to like about him, but nothing was so different here compared to Antonio Gibson. And I know the draft percentages were wildly different, but there was a very clear shift for Antonio Gibson, for even Jamal Williams. But then you go back to what are the odds Jamal Williams with a bad offense really makes me regret using him. It was a little bit higher for me than for you. I know that. I didn't actually get there because we got Sonny Michelle, but Sonny Michelle, fantastic offense, very clear role change, potentially a talent upgrade on Darrell Henderson. So you have to ask yourself, like, am I going to regret not using this guy?
Yeah. And again, if you use Gaskin, that's okay. Like, I've made that wasn't a stupid play. I've made actual stupid plays this week. So like, again, if you used him, it's totally fine. It's more so we're talking about, this is what we're looking for. And we hope that like that can be helpful in trying to identify things. So again, at quarterback, you need gobs of passing upside or some rushing. At running back, yards and touchdowns. At wide receiver, yardage and touchdowns. And I think that's kind of the way to look at it. Tight end's a bit different because you can have weeks where like a guy who gets 39 yards and 2 touchdowns will be in the perfect lineup. But
and you
for
can
those
also
positions.
And you can also have weeks at tight end where the studs don't have a big game. And so the salary you allocate there is just wasted. But we also can see George Kittle put up 35, Rob Gronkowski get to 19.8, Dallas Goddard, who we didn't talk about. I wouldn't have played him regardless, but Dallas Goddard's role is different than like punt play tight end roles. So, I mean, I'm fine not playing Dallas Goddard. I just saw Kyle Pitts' name and I wanted to say, like, I don't know if Kyle Pitts has any upside anymore, but it's just something that you really need to think about. Unless all you do is play your head-to-heads and like double ups, it's a little bit different. There
you want upside.
But I was going to say, there, you want guys who you want those George Kittles who can replace 2 bad picks in your lineup, because you're not going to hit all 9 picks statistically. It's going to happen very, very, very extremely rarely.
9-player parlay.
Yeah,
it's very difficult. But yeah, I think that just like having that like checklist in your mind of, does this player have a path to, I mean, like, again, not FOMO, but like make me regret not using them. That's the checklist we had with Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry in years past. I think that we need to like think about that especially when like there are other options. Cause like, again, not to like harp on Myles Gaskin. I used Myles Gaskin last week because there weren't alternatives. Yeah. It was different this week. So, just having a read on the landscape and stuff like that. But hopefully that's helpful. I don't know. If you got a question on it, just like hit us up. If we didn't clarify enough, what is upside? Why does it matter? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Speaking of upside, let's talk about Justin Jefferson here as we transition to the injury section. Adam Thielen left with a high ankle sprain early on in this game, which is a bummer because Thielen's pretty fun. But Jefferson, nuts. 14 targets, 182 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Conklin, the Conk Daddy, had 9 targets. KJ Osborne had 7 targets. Thielen's probably going to miss time because they play Thursday. And with a high ankle sprain, there's a good chance he misses beyond that too. So how does your view shift of Jefferson? How does your view shift of this entire Vikings offense going forward assuming Thielen misses time.
Yeah, so high ankle sprain, I don't want to project, but that might be more than just this week on a short week. So with that, obviously we want Justin Jefferson. That's not a huge shock. He got 2 red zone targets, 5 downfield targets, 2 end zone targets this past week. That's a safe one. I think the biggest shift is it makes Tyler Conklin more viable, and it also puts KJ Osborne back on the menu. His snap rate was around 50% for like 6 straight games,
It had
but
gotten bad, yeah.
it had gotten like to the point where, and there were weeks where we said, hey, KJ Osborne, relative to the whole slate, has upside. That went away, but he played 93% of the snaps in week 13. And had 7 targets for 47 yards, which doesn't sound great, but he did have 3 red zone targets and a downfield target. You want to look for that leverage. We're talking upside if that's the theme. Targets matter, but downfield targets are worth a lot more than a general target, especially a short target if you separate them out in that regard. Same for red zone targets, obviously. So KJ Osborne actually had some good weight on those targets. I was worth about almost 10 targets worth, despite having just 7.
Yeah, so I think that makes Osborne in play. I do think that it increases the appeal of Conklin because he's been a good player, and that matters. I think that this does hurt Kirk Cousins quite a bit because you look at his EPA per dropback targeting various players. Justin Jefferson, he's at 0.65, which is absurd. Like, that's bananas that he's been so good at Jefferson. But Thielen's at 0.26, and like that's still a good number. Like, I know it's not Jefferson's number, but it's still a good number. And so you take that out of the offense, and I mean, KJ Osborne's at 0.27, but like part of that's because Jefferson and Thielen are garnering so much attention. So like his Cousins EPA per dropback is going to fall across the board, I think, with Thielen being out. And so I think that what it does is it hurts everyone from an efficiency perspective. I think the volume will be enough where it increases Jefferson, increases Conklin and Osborne, but it really hurts Kirk Cousins. I think it negatively impacts Madison for Thursday. Negatively impacts, Dalvin, if he comes back before Thielen comes back. So I think volume boost for those guys, but overall, it's fair to be very concerned about this offense going forward because Thielen is actually a real, contributor to that offense from an efficiency perspective.
He is, but Justin Jefferson is a much more important piece.
Correct.
So I don't want to overreact. And the thing that really helps me not want to overreact too much is that Adam Thielen's vacating a very good red zone market share of 23%. Sure. And just like an outlier-ishly amazing touchdown rate in the red zone. So if you give me a little bit more touchdown juice for Justin Jefferson, Tyler Conklin, Alexander Madison, or Dalvin Cook, depending on who's back there, I like that.
Yeah, I think that what? Oh, Kirk? Yeah. Sorry, I caught it eventually. I think that the good thing is we were never considering Kirk Cousins on a full slate to begin with, really. Like,
it's funny. It's funny because we were talking upside and I knew that. And I was like, okay, Kirk Cousins to me is the prototypical, like he has potential for 300 plus yards and multiple touchdowns, which he's done in 5 games this year. He's gotten to over 300 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns. And he's like sitting between 20 and 25 FanDuel points. And like, that's his ceiling. And if he hits that ceiling and there's no like 30 plus point games from quarterbacks, that can work. So it's always slate dependent on how you're viewing upside, but his like max ceiling really still is like 25-ish FanDuel points if he has 300 plus and multiple touchdowns.
Yeah. There was a tweet yesterday about how like I think Kirk Cousins tied Brett Favre for the most games with 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks with this Lions game. And it was like, put Kirk in the Hall of Fame. And I couldn't tell if they were joking because Vikings Twitter is weird. I love Vikings Twitter and I'm happy to indulge, but couldn't tell if they were serious or not. Darrell Henderson, active this week, but just in case of emergency. Sonny Michelle played well. I think that's a key thing to focus on here. He took advantage of his opportunity. He had 24 carries, 4 targets. He had 129 yards in scrimmage. That is A new season high, not just for him, but for any Rams player. Michelle played 97% of the snaps. He had 46% of the red zone chances. And, I think it was Jordan Rodriguez had put out a tweet on Friday about how the Rams were underperforming relative to expectations in the ground game. And it was possible they would have made this change had Henderson not gotten hurt. I'm just trying to read into her tweet because she's very plugged in. But the vibe I got was that it's possible Michelle may have a legit role going forward. Maybe not 97%, but a legit role going forward because they were displeased with the efficiency from Henderson. So Sean McVay's a liar. I can't trust anything he says this next week. We're going into Monday night, Rams versus Cardinals. I don't want to trust anything he says. So what is your baseline assumption of what the role will look like in this backfield next week?
Probably not 97% snap rate for Sonny Michelle. I think that it'd probably scale back a little bit, but I don't see why he wouldn't take over the Darrell Henderson role with Henderson taking over kind of the not really role, but just snap rate. In 4 games, the 4 games leading into this one, Darrell Henderson was averaging about a 69% snap rate with Sonny Michelle at about 30%. I don't see why it still couldn't be about a 70-30 split in favor of Sonny Michelle. And that would be enough provided that the salary is reasonable. Of course, they're Monday night, so we won't have to deal with that on the main slate. But I don't care if Darrell Henderson's a full go starting practice this week. I would not feel comfortable playing him.
Yep.
I would if the salary was right on the Thursday through Monday slate, consider Sonny Michelle because that game has a really high total.
Yes, it'd be a very good game on the main slate. It's not. I'll be in Arizona this weekend for FanDuel FanFest, going to a Nelly concert on Saturday. So
I like that he's making a comeback.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. I need to start re-listening to Nelly to get ready. So if you're in Arizona on Saturday, come say hi at FanDuel FanFest. Got a Zachary Levi versus Kurt Warner throwing competition, which I am endlessly excited for. And then the FanDuel WFBC on Sunday too. But anyway, digress. What were we talking about? Oh yeah. So other thing about this is knowing which reporters to trust. I trust Jordan Rodriguez. That's why I put value in her tweet on Friday. I trust Adam Schefter. Adam Schefter tweeted at 4:16 a.m. on Sunday morning that the team was not optimistic that Henderson would play. I know there was the Mac Jones with San Francisco thing last year, but Schefty don't miss. And so if Adam Schefter says they're not optimistic that Henderson plays, I'm going to build lineups under the assumption that Michelle is the lead back. Henderson was active. Jay Glazer had said at 12:50 that Henderson may be active, but not sure what his role would be. So I trust Schefty. I trust Jay Glazer. Both their things combined to me said I could trust Michelle, which is why I had 60-something%. And the fielding was at 17% Michelle. So knowing which people to trust, knowing which ones to view skeptically. But I think that plugged in beat reporters, great. Adam Schefter, great. Jay Glazer, great. He was on the Kyler thing too with his ankle. Some others, if they're just kind of throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks, maybe be skeptical. But I think that if people you trust, decide who you trust, that's a long thing to sort through, but Schefty don't miss. I think that is an important thing as well. If he says they're not optimistic Henderson will be good to go, we can use Sonny Michelle with a good amount of confidence. There we go. Miles Sanders left early after aggravating his ankle injury. They've got a bye coming up, so he's likely good. But his role before that injury was great. He had 24 carries, 3 targets, 142 yards, a 50% red zone share. It was his best usage of the year, but it came with Boston Scott dealing with an illness. He did play, but didn't seem like he was at full health. Jordan Howard was out. So do you expect Sanders' increased role to stick after their bye week?
I think it'll be fine. I don't know if it's going to be enough where I want to target it. We're talking upside here. Yeah. Jordan Howard probably going to be back by the time that they play in week 15. I guess that is just.
Yikes.
And we know that he has a very involved red zone role. Boston Scott was sick. He played like 4 snaps or something.
Mm-hmm.
So Miles Sanders has the talent to have upside. I don't know if he's going to have the role with those question marks. And again, looking ahead to week 15, it's not something we're doing, but presumably we will have running backs with better paths to huge games than Miles Sanders in somewhat of a committee.
Would you say that it does increase your view of him, though?
It does, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be enough where, even if he's in the 6,400 range, I don't think that that's going to be like enough to tempt me.
I think I might be a little bit higher on him than you are, just because like this offense has been pretty good. I know, and like we'll talk about the Minshew stuff later on, but like they've had games like this with Hurts too. So I think regardless of who starts, like we could potentially see the offense playing well. Sanders had good work 2 weeks ago. He was getting decent work last week before his injury. So, I think a little bit higher on him than you may be, but there's still some flaws there, especially with Howard potentially taking goal line work and Hurts.
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
They're going to play Washington in week. They're at home against Washington week 15. That game might have an overall combined pass to run ratio or like a pass rate of like 30%.
Yeah.
Which is good for Sanders, but
yeah,
I think that there are going to be too many question marks with Scott 2 weeks recovered from an illness and Howard back in the mix.
Fair enough. Corey Davis aggravated his groin injury and was ruled out. Helped lead to big usage for Elijah Moore. 12 targets, 4 of those were deep, and 2 were in the red zone. So bad offense is cap upside because you can't score touchdowns if your offense doesn't score, and that's an issue. But Elijah Moore, 4 deep targets, 2 red zone targets. Zach Wilson played decently well for the most part on Sunday as well. So it's still a bad offense. What's your trust level with Elijah Moore right now?
Trust not really there, but 200 air yards. That helps me view him as someone with upside. And this is not a stat I look at, but it really feels like his touchdown share, not like red zone share, like touchdown opportunity share, feels like he's scoring all their touchdowns. That's not the case. I get that, but like he scores pretty frequently. I have him with 5 downfield targets, but either way, 4 or 5 is great. 2 red zone targets, 2 end zone targets. I'm not going to nitpick that workload within this offense. He's always going to be kind of in play for a one-off. If I really need to get there, although I try not to do that. They play the Saints next week.
That might be a spot to avoid and then buy back in when things get better.
I think so too. Okay. Their implied team total looks to be
18.75.
Well, yes, I was going to say second worst on the main slate, but no, there are 3 other teams below 18.
And then there's the Bears on Sunday night with 16.25. So
yikes.
Great stuff. I think that in a matchup like that, where he's facing a run heavy team that's going to drag down the pace of the entire game, really tough matchup, good defensive line that can take advantage of this Jets offensive line. It is a Ty Montgomery revenge game and a Sheldon Rankins, if he's healthy, revenge game. So there's that. But, I think that is a rough spot. We'll buy back in once things open up for Elijah Moore. Logan Thomas scored early. Then a bummer. It sounds like he tore his ACL, according to Adam Schefter. Thomas had 3 out of the 4 team deep targets. John Bates popped up here with 4 targets. He did have a full game earlier on this year with Thomas out and Ricky Seals-Jones out. Didn't do a whole lot there. He ran a lot of routes, but wasn't getting a lot of usage on those routes. So I'm hesitant on Bates, personally. What about you with Thomas likely done for the year?
I just don't have that much interest within this offense as far as pass catchers go. If you can't get Terry McLaurin going game by game, I don't know what the path to upside is for John Bates. No disrespect to John Bates, but I was actually when we were talking about upside and looking at draft percentages, Terry McLaurin was fairly popular, and I understand it as like he himself has the talent to have upside, but his role right now within this offense and just the way this offense is operating, there's not that much upside with him. I don't really think I'm going to be tempted by that at all.
Yeah. Especially when like he was by Keenan, he was by, I like Lockett a decent amount. He was by like legitimate dudes. I didn't get to any of them. Like, even though it was a high total site spread, they want to be so run heavy, which is good for Antonio Gibson, but not good for anybody else.
So we're talking upside. That's the theme of this show. John Bates, 4,600. He's going to get you access to higher upside plays at other positions. But for John Bates to have is he going to get to 12 FanDuel points ever if he scores one of their few touchdowns? Maybe. But next week we have Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Rob Gronkowski, Mark Andrews, potentially Darren Waller, T.J. Hawkinson, Dawson Knox, Kyle Pitts. We need all those guys to sort of be capped at 18, which can happen. We see weeks where that happens, but that's a long list of great tight ends. So I think it might be a week where we need to save some salary to get back up at tight end.
Yep, it is looking pretty fun next week at tight end. Likely nothing here. Did want to note that Austin Eckler left early with it seemed like an ankle injury against the Bengals. I think he's fine. There was a video of him walking out of the complex, and then he walked back in so you get a better shot of him walking out because he's great. I think he's fine. Just noting it here that he did get banged up late in case he misses practice early on this week. Kenyon Drake left after 7 snaps due to an ankle injury. Josh Jacobs played a career high 84% of the snaps. 13 carries for 52 yards, 9 targets for 38 yards. Jacobs now has at least 3 targets in 8 of his past 9 games. He has at least 4 targets in 5 straight. So no Kenyon Drake. Sounds like he broke his ankle and is done for the year. How are you viewing Jacobs with his receiving role being what it is right now?
Yeah, so he set a career high with 9 targets, which broke his prior high of 7 targets, which he got 2 games ago.
2 games ago, yeah.
So that's really promising. I know, you take Kenyon Drake out of the mix, you take Henry Ruggs, Darren Waller.
Jalen Richard was out due to COVID, but I think he got put on the list this morning, which means he might not play next week either.
So you take all that into account. Drake left early, but Peyton Barber played 9% of the snaps. He played 5 total snaps. So it wasn't Drake's out, and so Josh Jacobs still going to play his role, and they'll find another way to get someone else involved. We didn't really see that. Josh Jacobs historically for us has been a player we viewed as a low upside play.
Mm-hmm.
The receiving work really changes that. So I'm pretty high on Josh Jacobs. Who do they play next week?
Kansas City.
Yeah. Name that salary.
So he was oversalaried this week. I know he was fine, but I thought that he was oversalaried.
I had so much tunnel vision, I couldn't even tell you what Josh Jacobs' salary was. I was so fixated.
So I think it's 7,000. So he's at 30 adjusted opportunities in 2 straight games. It's very good. Hasn't converted that into a ton of yardage, but we know it seems like every time they score, it's Josh Jacobs. I don't know if that's it's kind of like your thing with Elijah Moore. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it. I think he was oversalaried before, but I'm bumping him up a pretty decent amount as a result of this. And what that comes out to is a salary of $7,200 for Josh Jacobs.
I think that's fair in this matchup. They're big underdogs, 8.5 points on the road. But if the receiving work's there and the snap rate's there, he's not going to be scripted out as easily. So I could see that. Yeah, I'd say about 7,072 right in there.
He is 71, so right between us. They cut the middle. Thank you, FanDuel, for that. I think it's fair. I still have concerns about yardage upside, but it's easier for him to have yardage upside if he's getting targets, which he is. So I think that helps a lot.
It also helps playing the Chiefs defense.
They've been good, man. I don't know. I mean, I guess Javonte just went silly, but they've been better with Chris Jones being inside and stuff like that. But yeah, that game's gonna be weird. I'm already dreading having to figure out that game. I hate it. I hate it so much that I have to think about having the Chiefs off the main slate this year has been the biggest blessing on the planet for my bankroll.
Yeah,
it's rough.
And I mostly meant the Chiefs kind of just they're not as focused on stopping the run.
Accurate. Mike Lennon suffered a concussion late for the Giants. Daniel Jones has not been cleared for contact and may not be able to go. Other quarterback on the roster is Jake Fromm, which means I have to go scrub some old Jake Fromm tweets from pre-draft before they get resurfaced if he starts. They're on the main slate. Obviously, the Giants would be a cross-off if Fromm starts, but how much would you worry about the Chargers on the other side if Jake Fromm is a starter here?
So the Chargers are 10.5 point favorites, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, 45.5 point over under.
That might be too high.
That still gives the Chargers a 28-point implied team total, which is tied for second best on the slate. I still wouldn't put it past the Chargers to keep that game a little bit close, like throughout.
To go full Charger.
Of course, I'm going to worry that the Giants have just not really been helpful for a lot of games, but honestly, the Chargers are just like, it's Justin Herbert, Eckler, Keenan, and I'm not that high on Mike Williams at this point. So like,
went for
I
100
probably have
yards
better
this week.
quarter. What's that?
He went for 100 yards this week. Justin Herbert's ADOT went up. We're talking about that later.
And he had a 20% target share finally on the nose. 20%. 20. So honestly, like I think it would just bump me off of Herbert unless quarterback is really bleak, which we'll find out as we do our salary scroll. But then it comes down to like, is there enough for Eckler? Is the salary right? And then did Keenan's salary jump up too much? But with the Chargers, like it's kind of easy to figure out, so I don't have to overthink it too much.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so let's move now to the role changes for this week. And the big one was Javonte Williams. Indeed, a feature back with no Melvin Gordon, 23 carries, 9 targets, $178 in total yardage. He had 4 out of 6 red zone chances. It was everything you'd hoped. He had, I guess we don't know what Melvin's status will be for next week. If Melvin can't go, name that salary for Javonte Williams at home against Detroit.
So Denver, 8-point favorite, 43.5 point over under. So their implied team total is a decent 25.75. I think that's good enough with how good Williams is. Like he's just phenomenal. This is one of those where we could be way apart and I'd still think that they're both justified. So I'm going to kind of split the difference here and go like 78.
If Melvin sits,
it's still a bad offense.
I don't care.
Yeah, I know, because you were going to play Dearness Johnson at 9,000 in this matchup.
Mm-hmm. I was. Didn't have to, but his role in a competent offense, like they're not terrible. They're not, especially in week 14 context. His role is worth $8,500 against the Lions. Like that's the kind of role he had. I don't care what he did with it. That's his role. His skill is fun, but like from a role perspective against Detroit, and Detroit's like, I think they're better against the run than perception. That's why I'd say it. But like that's 85.
Well, you'll be pleased, Jim. Because he's 67.
Oh my gosh!
So I wasn't a huge
directly
dummy.
At the camera, Melvin, rest up, buddy. We'll see you week 15 or later on. I don't know, but like, get some Z's in, buddy, and let's let Javonte run wild again.
I mean, he played Sunday night, so that's gonna have a lot to do with it, with the salary being what it is. So.
But that's like borderline lock button territory if Melvin can't.
That's lock button territory, yeah.
Yeah, baby. Let's go. Doesn't matter if it's 85 or 78, 67 is lower than both. So yeah. It's a sick roll. Sick player, sweet matchup. Rest up, Melvin. First game with no Deebo Samuel. The 49ers featured George Kittle and Eli Mitchell. Mitchell set a season high with an 85% snap rate. He had 22 carries and 3 targets, and that was even with Jermichael Hasty being active for this game. I had concerns about that. I should not have. That was very stupid. Kittle had 12 targets. He had twice as many as anybody else. 2 of those were deep targets. Brandon Ayuk had 6 targets with 1 deep. They get Cincinnati on the road next week. That is a fun game, I think. Where's the total in that game? Oh, 47.5.
1 point spread.
Joe Burrow is a 1-point dog. If they get those offensive linemen back, sorry. Anyway, name that salary. Eli Mitchell and George Kittle for next week.
Well, if I apply the gym tax to a great snap rate, I got to say 9,700 for Eli Mitchell. No, I'd still probably put him. It's a good game. 82.
So I think that he is in the Josh Jacobs discussion where he was over salaried this week because I wasn't sure the passing game role, but then the passing game role was better than I thought it might be. So I'm going to put him at 78 because it's still not a big
You dummy.
It's still not a big passing game.
You dummy.
What do you mean?
Just messing with you.
I think 78 is fair. And he is 74. Sweet. That's fine. I'll take that. That's totally fine. Good player, a lot of volume. I know they didn't win, but like decent offense too. I think San Francisco puts a lot of thought into how they travel, so I'm less worried about traveling to the East Coast. It's also an afternoon game, which may help too. So I think that that's a pretty sweet situation. So I think that
Did you just call Cincinnati the East Coast?
Close enough. There are people who put Ohio in the Midwest, which is like, it's not egregious, but it's not optimal. Do you call Ohio the Midwest? You're a Pennsylvania boy.
Yeah.
People call you Midwest, by the way, because you're
That's the
Western
thing.
half. Yeah.
Well,
I'm very defensive of the Midwest, and I don't want Skyline Chili in the Midwest. Like that's the big differentiator for me.
Well, like central Pennsylvania is not Northeast. It's more Midwest than Northeast, I think.
I mean, New Hampshire is like Midwest.
Yeah.
It's Wisconsin. So like, you know, I don't think that should dictate. Like by that rationale, New Hampshire should be in the Midwest. Anyway, this is my New Hampshire is actually Wisconsin take for today. I think Mitchell's great at that salary. What about Kittle?
Yeah, phenomenal. We know that he has that upside, that buzzword we're talking about, but none of this is surprising. He's one of the best yards after catch players in football. You know, I want to say, if not for some incredible footwork, it would have been such a huge game. But he's capable of that, and I'm sorry, but like John Bates isn't, and so
breaking news.
But yeah, and like anyone who is listening is saying, well, the salaries make it difficult to compare the two. Like, yes, that's why you always have to look at everything slate dependent, and really the goal is to find the lowest salaried plays you can find who still have slate altering upside. And if that doesn't exist at tight end, it doesn't exist at tight end. Like that's how you have to view it. And then you have to figure out whether the studs are going to have a big game or not.
Yeah.
It goes back to like the Thanksgiving slate. It's like if Josh Allen or Dak don't have big games, the lower salary quarterbacks are viable. But if they do, and Josh Allen did, you just can't really make that up.
Yeah. And like when there are so many guys who could go off, it's not Kittle, it's Kelsey, it's Gronk in a really fun game, Dawson Knox in that same game, Mark Andrews with absurd usage recently. Yeah. The odds one of those guys goes off is pretty high. So I think that your read that we want to allocate salary to tight end is correct. Kittle for next week checks in at 71.
It's fine.
I could see that being higher, honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's where I'd be with that. So the
Any
49ers
quickly.
I mean, I thought that 7,000 was a tiny bit high for a run-centric offense. I think he's still worth like 67 because like it wasn't a huge deviation from what I expected, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You know? I would have said about 66, 65, and he's 64. So within that game, I think I'll have some interest there because he's going to be a player that I probably target because it's like I'm going down as low as I can go with still kind of telling myself there's some upside and he should have upside.
Yeah, I think that he does. So I'm sad there's no Debo, but this offense is pretty fun when the usage is concentrated.
Yeah.
We got our first glimpse at the 2021 Saints of Taysom Hill. Now Hill hurt his finger, so this could all be moot, but he had a good fantasy outing, 264 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, 11 carries for 101 rushing yards. He was awful as a passer and probably not going to get better with like a jacked up finger. He was at negative 0.29 passing net expected points per drop back. Part of that was because of the picks, and those were a negative script. So that is what it is. But Hill last year, 0.06 passing net expected points per drop back across his starts. So not looking at the full season, across his starts, rushing volume and yardage. He did throw it downfield 8 times. ADOT was 5.6 yards. Deontay Harris led the team with 8 targets. Traquan Smith and Ty Montgomery had 7 each. Smith was the only Saint to have multiple downfield targets. Didn't catch either of them. And weirdly, the team actually had a 60% early down first half pass rate. It was 51% of Trevor Siemian and 50% of Jameis. They were actually more pass heavy, which is weird. So there's a lot going on here. Just give me your view of the Saints with Taysom Hill with a banged up finger.
I would play Taysom Hill if I hear that the finger is fine.
It's not.
And if it's not, then I won't play anyone, and I'll continue as usual with the Saints. I think it comes down to, I think that's as easy as it is. Like the Deontay Harris target share can be fine. That's not really what I'm looking for. I need a little bit more than that kind of role within this offense.
So I think that he is a good example of what we talked about previously, where you want, like, you can't have just rushing, because he had 101 rushing yards and 264 and 2 touchdowns and still had 24.66 FanDuel points. You don't see a lot of guys go for 101 on the ground and still have just 25. Now, if he had a rushing touchdown, which he very well could, he's at 30. So he has a path to upside, especially against the Jets, but I think that path becomes muddier when his finger is banged up, and it's tough to project there to be a lot of passing efficiency. I could see this being a situation where they take a Derrick Henry approach with Taysom Hill and just kind of say, go till you're broke, because they're in win now. They need to win, given their playoff positioning. So I think that a 125 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground is very possible, but the odds he reaches like a good passing game go down with the finger injury.
Yeah. So what salary is low enough to tempt you on Taysom Hill?
Well, I already saw it. It's $7,700. So I cheated. Sorry.
No, that's fair. That's too high for me. I haven't looked at other quarterbacks, but with the context I've gleaned so far from the rest of the teams on the main slate, it's going to be too high for me. I still think he would be viable if he were somehow in like the low 7,000s. If that was the difference, because the rushing is virtually guaranteed. But other than that, like I'm gonna have no Saints, so nobody against the Jets next week.
I think that it is a bit different given it's the Jets. So that does help, but I'm also curious where he'll wind up from a roster rate perspective next week, because people will talk about the rushing all week. It's already started. Like that's going to be the key thing all week is Javonte, and then what the Chiefs did against the Raiders a couple weeks ago. That'll be a key talking point, and then Taysom Hill's rushing will be the key talking points this week. I don't know where I'm at there, so we'll see. But I think he's a consideration, not a cross-off at that salary, because the rushing is so good. But it's hard for me to get as jazzed when I can't expect the passing to be fun.
Okay. I know this all too well, but Lamar Jackson's had, for him, 3 straight down games.
Yeah.
His salary is $7,900 next week against the Browns. I cannot really perceive a situation in my life that I talk myself into Taysom Hill over Lamar Jackson at very similar salaries.
Well, league MVP versus 32-year-old, Swiss Army knife. I don't know. I know Lamar has not played like the MVP this year, but still, I agree. Okay, we got a 2-game sample now on the Rams with Odell Beckham at full snaps. And in those games, Cooper Kupp has a 26% target share. Then Jefferson second at 22%. Odell's at 20%, but leads in deep target share at 33%. Van is at 28% there, whereas Kupp's at 22%. So 2-game sample, still very small. I think the encouraging thing is that both Odell and Van are getting downfield work and good overall work. Kupp, like, his shares are lower, but I don't care. I think he's still, like, I'm not going to nitpick that one. I think all 3 grade out well for me based on the usage they've got in these first 2 games. What about you?
Yeah, it's going to be one of those offenses that we can virtually always turn to. Matthew Stafford got a little dinged up, but I think he's fine overall. And then it's just going to come down to whether we can get up and justify to Cooper Kupp in our lineups. And then if not, which of the 2, I'll call them both secondary receivers, that we prioritize. For me, I do think it's going to be Van Jefferson, just because the yardage juice seems to be a little bit more there than with Odell, who really bailed himself out with the touchdown yesterday. But I have really no issues. I'm sorry, Jim. I cannot get to Tyler Higbee really myself.
Oh no, I had his numbers on the sheet and did not say them because he's the new fake player. So someone's been fake each week. I unfaked T. Higgins in time to use him this week, which is good. So I bailed myself out there. I could have made a very grave mistake and did not. Who is the fake person this week? There was someone who was fake. Like, can you convince me that X person is real? I can't remember who it was. I think it's Tyler Higbee. Convince me Tyler Higbee exists. You can't. You can't convince me.
I've never tried to, but
that's accurate. I'm talking to previous Jim. Convince me, and he can't either. He's sitting there looking at his bankroll with Tyler Higbee, and it ain't great. So yeah, I think that to me it's Cup in a tier of his own, gap. Van 2A, Odell 2B. I'm interested in the fact that Van actually was on more rosters than Odell this week. I was shocked because I had two lineups, differentiating across single entry, duplicated them, except put Van in one and Odell in another under the assumption that Odell would be more popular. The Odell one is in a smaller field, the Van one in a larger field. That was the only difference I made. And I was kind of surprised to see Van. It's probably because Odell was quote unquote questionable, but it still surprised me, I would say.
Yeah. I think it could come down to, and we've had these situations in the past, like with other teams where it's like, just play the guy who has lower buzz around him entering the week.
The Michael Crabtree, Amari Cooper equation from years past.
Michael Crabtree always had less buzz.
He did.
And
he always outproduced Amari. One-Eyed Jack is saying that I already faked Tyler Higbee. So Tyler Higbee has been already. So I don't even know why I had his name here because he's not a real player. So he was already fake. I'll find a new one for next week. We'll figure this out. It's not T. Higgins though.
Is it Myles Gaskin?
Yeah, maybe. Although I've benefited from Gaskin like on two different slates this year, so maybe I shouldn't do that. Like that seems kind of mean to him. He's been nice to me. I did just trash him earlier on today, but still, I don't know. Yeah. Either way, Brands are great. Antonio Gibson set a career high in snap rate in his first game with no J.D. McKissic. Played 82% of the snaps, 23 carries and 6 targets. If we look at the 4 games since the bye, 3 of which were with J.D. McKissic, Gibson is at 24 carries, 4 targets, and 31.3 carries plus 2x targets per game. He's at 108 yards per game. So if McKissic misses more time, name that salary for Antonio Gibson in week 14 against Dallas.
This is another 80+% snap rate with who had the same exact workload.
Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs. Well, no, Eli Mitchell, 85% snap versus 82, 23 and 6 versus 22 and 3. So we're getting to the point where, look, guys are banged up, and yes, true, incredible upside exists at the superstar level of running back, which I don't actually think we have a whole lot of on the main slate. So we could get numerous new feature backs, which is kind of weird to call Josh Jacobs, Antonio Gibson, new feature backs, but they really weren't. They are now. I don't know. Throw them up there in the 77 range. I still don't love the offense, but
that's where I was.
Yeah.
77 is, I think, the exact number I would have said. And Gibson against Dallas is at 74, so they did jack him up more. But it's fair. I think that 74 is fair. It's not a massive bargain like we have with Javonte.
Mm-hmm.
But that's on the good end, where I think between Gibson, Jacobs, Mitchell, we've got, and potentially Javonte, we got rock solid mid-range plays again at running back this week.
Yeah, so the thing that I'll probably talk about plenty on Thursday is give me George Kittle because I have Josh Jacobs with an 80% snap rate,
right?
Which I haven't really had a lot this season. The mid range, like roughly 6,000 to 7,000 range, which isn't quite the mid range, but at running back has been pretty bad. It's a lot of traps this year. A lot of guys who you have to convince yourself are going to have bigger roles in a game, which can't really do because it's not how it works generally.
Yeah.
We might have that this week, even up in the 7,000 range. So I'm pretty excited for the week 14 main slate already.
And there's no Jonathan Taylor on next week's slate, which means, I mean, like I'm bummed because I love Jonathan Taylor, but also no Myles Gaskin. So one less guy there. The Lions were committee-ish at running back without DeAndre Swift. Jamal Williams played less than half the snaps. He still had 17 carries, but just one target. So to me, if we're not going to get 80% snap rate here, I can ignore this backfield. Do you agree?
Yeah, this is what we've been dealing with. We don't want to deal with these types of backfields. We want to deal with like the Josh Jacobs, Antonio Gibsons. So, and I thought that the snap rate would be better. I liked Williams plenty. Again, I did pivot off of him for the most part by Sunday because we for sure had Sonny Michelle. The reason I got off of Williams instead of Gibson was just simply due to the implied team total, the offensive expectations being really low for the Lions relative to the other value backs.
We also have a new fake player via One-Eyed Jack on YouTube, Laviska Shenault. I need no convincing. You're right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Accepted. There was a bit of a non-change in the Cowboys backfield, despite the buzz about Zeke maybe being limited or sitting. Zeke had a 66% snap rate. Tony Pollard played 39% of the snaps. Elliott led with 13 carries to Pollard 7. Pollard had 4 targets to Zeke's 3. The team threw all 4 plays they were in the red zone. Pollard and Zeke each had a red zone target. So there was no change. They're facing Washington next week. Pretty good game. How are you viewing this backfield right now?
I'm probably on a main slate going to avoid it.
I agree.
I don't think that there's enough from Zeke health-wise. And it's weird that I'm like sticking up for Zeke because I'm usually anti big contracts.
Establishment.
Yeah. But like he's still been like league average while being very clearly not 100% or close to it. Tony Pollard I love, but you can't will Tony Pollard into a 70% snap rate. It doesn't work.
If we could have, it would have happened a long time ago.
It sure would have. You need the long touchdown. It's always like unfair to do this, but according to Next Gen Stats, his expected rushing yards this past week, 21.6. He ended up with 71 because of that long run. Yes, you want guys who overperform that number, but like, again, take that away and we're looking at someone who had 7 carries, 4 targets, 39% snap rate.
Yeah.
That's not what that's not a DFS target.
Right. So that's why we can't use Pollard. The reason I can't use Zeke is that the yardage upside has not been there since the knee injury. He has not topped 76 since week 6. So can't get to Pollard right now. Can't get to Zeke right now. And that's okay. I can be okay ignoring a backfield. One less team to consider. I can go to the receivers instead. That's totally fine. Russell Gage finally showed some upside. My bad. I made a bet with our colleague Austin Swain that Amari Cooper would outscore Russell Gage this week because Cooper was like on the COVID list. That was before it was reported he was like sitting out of warmups, but like I was still wrong because Russell Gage had 130 yards on Sunday. What the F? It's almost double his previous high for the season. Did it on 12 targets. We got a 6-game sample without Calvin Ridley. In those games, Kyle Pitts and Russell Gage are tied for the team lead in targets at 21%. Pitts does lead with a 41% deep target share, whereas Gage is at 18%. I would also note that Gage had a 0 target game in that sample, which means could be even better, or it could mean he has a 0 target game in his range of outcomes. So is this enough for you to consider Russell Gage in DFS?
It's still gonna take the right situation. It's gonna take the right salary. It's gonna take a really promising matchup. It's going to go back to what we talked about, or like my first trend last week for upside from value receivers. I really need it to be indoors, which of course it's the Falcons. So we'll get some of those down the stretch. Good, like really weak pass defenses. You got to get a little bit nitpicky when it comes to projecting out these value receivers, but he's really the 1B here, or like the 1A. I pulled a sample specifically from passes from Matt Ryan since week 8 without Calvin Ridley. Basically the same thing. It's like a 1 target difference between he's behind Pitts. The main issue is, I think, touchdown equity, not even yardage potentially, but like this is just a pretty bad offense. And everything sort of points to Kyle Pitts having some touchdown regression too. So that's maybe it's overthinking it, but I'm really going to need like the perfect the perfect checklist to get to Russell Gage.
I'm guessing their salaries will be pretty similar. I would just use Pitts. I know, like, he still has better upside, I think. And I think that's, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being like stubborn, which shocker.
So
when have I ever been stubborn?
Yeah, never.
Gage is actually higher salaried. What in the world? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So they're at Carolina, and Carolina's coming off of a bye.
Nope.
That's not great. Is this the second time they've played this year?
I can't remember a first time.
No, I don't think so. I think it's their first time. But still, I mean,
that's a bad game.
What about like just because we're talking about this offense? Did you see enough from Cordero? Like, because his snap rate remains kind of low. It was like 50-50 with he and Mike Davis, but he just gets good work.
He does more with it too.
Yes, but we just like don't like the offense.
So he had 96 yards this week, 135 last week, 136 in his previous healthy game. The yardage upside has still been there despite kind of weird usage, 21, 22, and 23 carries plus 2x targets. So it's fine, but it's not, I think he's oversalaried, if that answers your question.
Yeah. Also, the Falcons did play the Panthers on Halloween. Matt Ryan went 20 of 27 for $146, 1 touchdown.
That was the game where Ridley was ruled out before this at like 11:30. That was that game.
So second time around matchup.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. That game doesn't exist. It's a fake game. The Dolphins got Devante Parker back this week for the second game since week 4. Parker tied with Mike Gesicki for the second most routes on the team at 31, but just 5 targets. If we look at the 3 games with Tua Tagovailoa and Devante Parker healthy, Jalen Waddle has a 28% target share. My gosh. He has 33% of the deep targets and 46% of the red zone targets. Those numbers are smaller samples because 3 games, they're not throwing deep a ton. They're not in the red zone a ton, but it's noteworthy. Devontae is at a 22% target share with 27% deep. Gesicki is at 16% overall, 27% deep. I am jacking up Jalen Waddle in my mind. I had worried about upside previously, but he's been getting more of that recently. The problem is that from a salary perspective, this is not like a thing to say, hey, Jalen Waddle's doing stuff. Everyone knows that. Devante Parker likely pretty low in that department. They're on a bye this week. So it'll be, I think they get the Jets after the bye though. So where are you at on Devante Parker and Jalen Waddle right now?
Yeah, I like Jalen Waddle plenty. I won't be alone in that. I was trying to get my spreadsheet sorted to those games we're talking about. So in those games, because it's a small sample of just 3 games, if I look at target per route rate, Jalen Waddle's at 29%, which is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I think Cooper Kupp's at like 30% for the full season. Parker's at 23%. Gesicki down at 20%. Of course, the hierarchy is going to be Waddle, and then debate between Gesicki and Parker depending on how tight end and value receiver look. But I think I could go back in on Parker, assuming that, and with the 5 targets, not a whole lot there. He's probably going to come back with a 5 in front of his salary, and I think that he'll be absolutely on the radar. I've seen enough from that. Waddle, it's going to depend on how high the salary gets, because if you put him up in the low 7,000s, then he's with all the bona fide like tier 2 slate altering potential guys. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he doesn't have that, but it's a little bit less inclined to go there over some other options.
I agree with every word you just said.
Thank you.
To a T. I think we're on the same page. Okay, Devonta Freeman played 68% of the snaps for the Ravens this week. Highest mark for a Ravens running back all season. He had 14 of 17 running back carries, 8 out of 10 running back targets, and a 14 carry, 8 target workload with a 68% snap rate, if you ignore the name, is very good. So is this enough where you would actually consider using Devonta Freeman in daily fantasy? A question I didn't think I'd ask this year.
Yeah, I picked up Freeman and dropped him like 7 times this year. 7's a bit of an exaggeration, but I was like, there's never going to be enough. Yeah. And this could be enough within this Ravens offense, you always have to put a hard cap of 70% for any running back just based on how they work. It's been the case for years now. They play the Browns on the road next week. Nice old 42.5 point over under, just a 2-point spread. We'll probably see.
But it's a 2-point spread in favor of Cleveland, which is wild considering that Baltimore was a 4.5-point favorite against Pittsburgh this week. And honestly, this may sound outrageous, but what's the difference between Pittsburgh and Cleveland right now?
So I could see it if the salary is in like the 62 range and there's nothing else valuable at running back. But if it's any higher than that, I think I'd have to worry. I wouldn't quite project 8 targets for him again.
Yeah. I think he's like...
Is he Myles Gaskin?
Gaskin-ish, yeah. He's Gaskin-ish. So if there are no alternatives, I can get there. But if I have really good alternatives, like if I have Javonte Williams, no. Like, I'm not going there. I'm not going to do it, so quit asking.
So he had this great snap rate, great overall workload, scored on the ground, ended up with 18.2 FanDuel points.
Is that his ceiling?
That is his highest output all season, yes.
No, but I mean, like, is that his ceiling? Is that his best case scenario?
It's probably close to it.
Yeah.
About 100 total yards and a touchdown.
He is $6,300. So if we have no alternatives, sure. Fine. But I'm not actively seeking him out yet, despite that. Okay, let's go to situations to monitor. What other stuff stood out to you this week that we have not yet discussed?
So this one's specifically for Jim because we saw Chris Godwin have a fantastic workload.
I used him in our head-to-head. You can't...
But I think you're projecting or something. I said this is a question for Jim. And you're getting all defensive. Chris Godwin had 17 targets. Mike Evans had 10. Rob Gronkowski, Leonard Fournette had 8 each in 4 games with Gronkowski and no Antonio Brown. Mike Evans leads with a 20% target share with 9 targets per game. Godwin's close behind at 19%. Gronk at 18%. Fournette at 14%. Is there anyone you view as the top priority here? And the real reason I wanted to ask this is, do you see a role shift for Chris Godwin?
No, but I didn't need a role shift to use him because I used him this past week. Let me read you verbatim from my piece on Friday. Godwin has put up yardage totals of 74, 65, and 24 in the 3-game sample with Gronk and Mike Evans and no Antonio Brown. That's underwhelming, and you understand why given the lack of downfield volume. That does not mean Godwin is incapable of big games. It's just not his most likely outcome. That keeps Godwin from being a key standalone play. But if this game features a bunch of points, Godwin likely contributes a healthy chunk of the time. So I think that his floor is the same. I think his ceiling is exactly what it was. Not a role change. I'm fine with him. In games that I want to stack, they get Buffalo next week. I want to stack that game. So I'm going to use Chris Godwin. I don't think it's a role change because I think that he is what I thought he was. Gold star?
All right, let's talk about Mike Williams and potential role change. Mike Williams got back up to a 20% target share, 20.0 on the nose. That's not great for a single game. Yardage upside returned this week. I do not want to overreact. I think he's now, I want to say like 8 out of 9 games. Well, I guess now like 9 out of whatever. He's got like 2 games with at least a 20% target share since like week 4. Do you think that this is a return to the closer to the early season stuff, or do you think he's going to be back around 15-16% next week?
So I want to talk about the charges and philosophical changes because that will correlate with the Mike Williams stuff. So let's return to that later.
Okay, don't call him Mike Evans.
Sorry, you're right. I thought that you were messing up Mike Evans when you said Mike Williams because they're both Mikes. They're both really big. They're both good at football, and I was very confused. But I was like, oh, you're actually changing the subjects. Okay. Yeah. So I caught on eventually. A little slow.
Just a small one that I keep checking on, but since week 5 with T. Higgins back, he actually leads the Bengals in target share at 24 or 25.2%. Higgins Chase is at 24.1%. Tyler Boyd 15.8%. It's not a knock on Jamar Chase. It's just like reassurance that T. Higgins is not like a distant
it's not
number
fake.
2. Yeah, he's not fake. He's not a distant number 2 within this offense. And then Alexander Madison did have the role that a lot of people thought he would. 86% snap rate, 22 carries, 3 targets, which I think literally might be Elijah or Eli Mitchell's exact numbers there. But
right. He did lose some to Nwangwu, and Nwangwu was dealing with an illness, but not enough where I think you worry. Yeah. Like, he's fine. But, he is what we thought he was. For me, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's role coming out of the bye was underwhelming, I thought. He had 14 carries and 3 targets. He played 50% of the snaps. I thought they might get him more involved, and they did not. He still actually ran fewer routes than Darrell Williams. It's tough for CEH to have a big role in that current setup. So I was hoping for more, didn't get it here. David Montgomery finally got some work in the passing game. He had 9 targets on Sunday. His previous high was 4. He had 39 adjusted opportunities, 141 yards, both of which were also season highs. I don't know if it's a new norm, especially with Justin Fields likely back next week, and they're not in the main slate. But just quickly, does this change how you're viewing Montgomery at all?
I don't think drastically, no.
I think it increases his ceiling, but doesn't change anything else, which is fine. I'll take that. I'll take an increased ceiling, but does it increase the odds he gets that ceiling? Maybe not. I thought it was good, and I'm encouraged by it, but I don't want to overreact, given I'm not going to project him for 9 targets going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Finally, a sad one. You can omit Rashad Bateman from lineups. You probably should have, given the yardage stuff previously, but now officially. Ran a route on just 41% of dropbacks this week. He was at 56% last week. So I like the player, hate the role. So hopefully we'll see you in 2022, Rashad Bateman. Let's move now to philosophical changes and talk about that Chargers offense, because the Chargers let Justin Herbert cook. His ADOT was 10.2. His season-long mark entering somehow was 7.0. What? He went deep on 26% of his attempts. That's up from 14%. Led to big days from Mike Williams. Jalen Guyton, Keenan Allen scored twice. So I think that's the shift here, is that they let him rip it deep more. I'm not sure if that is sustainable. I think that Brandon Staley is a very smart coach. I'm not sure if that can overcome Joe Lombardi's baseline as an offense, which is, some not going deep as often as you would like. So I think, to me, I'm going to up them a bit, but I'm not going to drastically change the way I view this offense, which means still going to think Keenan Allen's going to get a massive target share. Still going to think that Mike Williams has a wide range of outcomes, which does include a high end, but doesn't include a super high probability of getting there. So to me, I boost upside up a bit, but don't change things too much. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that the big shift in pass rate from them in non-garbage time situations, but it just it comes down to who all are you really considering from this offense?
I don't need to consider more than 4 guys. Herbert, Allen, Mike Williams, Eckler. Sick. Log out.
Yes. This goes back to Mike Evans, or now you got me doing it. Mike Williams. Are you considering him heavily? Would you say that you?
Yeah. So I had a lot of Herbert this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I had enough Burrow, and a lot of sacks that game. I had 44% Keenan, 17% Mike Williams. That's not that high. So
did this week increase you then on Mike Williams? Because for me, it really didn't.
I mean, it increased a little bit because I think that the odds he hits the ceiling are higher if they're going to let it rip. But it's not like if I had redone my exposures, I would say go from 17% to 25%, maybe somewhere in there.
Okay, so
a slight shift up, but not a huge one.
So I agree to just shift with offensive philosophy. I don't really think that it changes who I'm considering, though.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I don't think it changes the hierarchy of how I rank them when considering them either.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay, we're on the same page. Nice. I would assume that Jalen Hurts is back after the Eagles bye week, but just in case Gardner Minshew starts again, whether that week or later on this year, it's worth noting they were still pretty run heavy. The team's early down first half pass rate with Minshew was 45%. So even with Minshew, they're going to pound the rock. I had some Devontae Smith this week under the hope that they would increase their pass rates, and it led to Dallas Goddard going nuts. Devontae did nothing. Does this change your view of Goddard and Devontae at all, or are we just kind of hanging out?
Still low on them. I know Goddard converted this week, but they've had by far the lowest non-garbage time pass rate over their 5 games entering this week, and it did not change with a quarterback shift.
I think he's fine in his, like, I used him on the 1 p.m. only slate because there was no Kittle. There was no, I mean, Gronk was there. There's no Kittle, no Moreau, I had Gerald Everett. I shouldn't admit that publicly given the way he played, but yeah, I did. I think he was fine there. I think he's fine. But if there's legit competition, tougher. So he's fine. He is what he is. And Devontae, very good player. Not the kind of offense I want to target a receiver in typically, or not the kind of games I want to target a receiver in typically either. So that's where I'm at there. Let's go to the salary scroll, taking a look at the main slate for week number 14 over on FanDuel.com. Great place. Okay. Starting off at quarterback, shout out what you see.
A lot of studs.
I see Tom Brady at $8,200, and I think I'm going to go back for the 3rd straight week.
I could see that.
Josh Allen in that same game is 88. I think both those are great numbers, and I feel like that's going to be what I build around this week is those two.
It does feel as though Dak Prescott could go a little bit forgotten at 81.
I'm always a little bit hesitant with them outdoors. Not as much as I used to be because I think they're just a better offense now, but little bit, tiny baby bit hesitant.
Lamar at 79, I think, is going to really make us pause and think.
I think he and Josh Allen will be like the quote unquote optimizer plays of the week, but that's fair.
I'm not going to play Taysom Hill then.
With Lamar being there? Yeah.
With Lamar being there. I'm not going to play Russell Wilson.
Why is Drew Lock $7,200?
Because in case of injury
Detroit.
against the Lions.
It's Detroit, that's why. Okay. Derek Carr 72, high game, high total game. A game will probably stack. However, with Marcus Mariota justifiably taking some goal line work because he's a better quarterback, I'm not going there.
Joe Burrow 71.
That I could do. That I could very much do. Especially if they get their offensive lineman back this week, I could very, very easily see myself doing Joe Burrow at 71.
And if his hand's all right.
Yeah, it looked really gross.
He looked to be in pain, yeah.
I mean, that like his pinky was like the size of mine, and I'm a little bigger than Joe Burrow, so it probably shouldn't be the same size. But yeah, 71 for him. Like Joe Burrow, we talk about upside. I think although he has not necessarily shown it at times this year, a lot of that's because of touchdowns being all Joe Mixon. If those touchdowns break his way, I think 30 is within his range of outcomes, right or no?
That's like 95th percentile for him.
Yeah, okay.
But here's the thing. At 71, 25, 26, 27 FanDuel points can do it. I think this salary being what it is, it's not like it's a Kirk Cousins like 75 or something, which I know is kind of splitting hairs, but 400 is pretty sizable when it comes to quarterback.
So I would say
salaries.
To me, standouts are Josh Allen, Brady, Lamar, Burrow, and then Mahomes and Dak kind of hanging out and lurking, I guess, right?
I mean, I could talk myself into already Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Brady, Dak, Lamar, and Burrow.
I can't do Herbert with the way the Giants set up.
I can play Justin Herbert against the Giants. I think I'll be all right.
Go ahead.
I'm saying I could make the case for it. I'm not saying he's going to be a.
That's fair. Okay, moving to running back. Speaking of Justin Herbert, his running back, Austin Eckler, is the highest salary guy in the slate at $9,200.
And we have 3 backs above 78.
That's it.
So we are going to be able to get to tight end We might not need this. So again, going back to upside, does Joe Burrow have 30-point upside? Yeah, if things fall his way. Do we need to go to Joe Burrow? Forego the guys who definitely have 30-point upside in good games. Whenever we don't have that much salary we need to allocate to running back, probably not.
Very fair. I would say don't write off Joe Mixon, salary back down to 85. Again, I want to keep an eye on the offensive linemen. Their center and right guard or right tackle were out this week. So if they're back, I could see that being a pretty good situation for them. Keeping an eye on Mixon, I would not write him off after this week.
Do you have a read? Because you know way more about injuries than I do. Do you have a read on Alvin Kamara?
He's probably going to play that. He practiced. He was limited this whole past week and now has 10 days. So he'll play.
So Kamara at 9,000 against the Jets. I feel like if he plays, he's ready to play.
Yeah, but like it's with Taysom, means he'll lose some goal line work. And like that's a pretty big concern to have for a guy at 9,000.
Yeah, he's actually been one of the worst running backs relative to expected yards on the ground. So hopefully he comes back and is a little bit healthier.
Yeah, I think it depends on if Ramczyk and Armstead are back too, because if you get that offensive line against, Sheldon Rankins missed this past week against the Jets defense. I mean, Quentin Williams is still very good, but like that could be, I just think that 9,000 is a lot for a guy who has any red flags.
Yeah. So I think the question at running back is going to be, does Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara, or Joe Mixon have so much potential over all of the 7,000 backs that you need to prioritize them?
Yeah.
Or can you save 2,000-ish from Eckler to like an Eli Mitchell or Antonio Gibson and then reallocate that back into other positions?
Right. I think that's the right question to ask. As far as the mid-range goes, Lenny is 76. Tough matchup with Buffalo, but,
I don't think I have to do that.
Not when Eli Mitchell is 74, Antonio Gibson 74 in games that we'll like, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs 71, a game we'll like.
Potentially Javonte.
Zeke is 69.
Ooh.
That's not low enough for me to get there, given the lack of yardage upside, but like that's where he should be, right?
That feels about right. Yeah. I still would have put him at 7,000, show him a little respect, but
Javonte at 67 is the highlight here, obviously. So like if we get Javonte, Jacobs, Gibson, and Mitchell, mid-range is sick, build around that, go from there.
Yeah. So I don't think we'll need Devonta Freeman at 63. Jamal Williams at 62. I think that's probably a little bit. That's probably fair. It's fair.
No, not if he's going to split snaps.
Yeah, right. I'm saying just salary. Not that I have interest in him. Deontay Foreman, 59, has a great red zone role for a terrible offense.
I think they like Hilaire, and I think that McKissick will be back this week. Or not, sorry, man, not McNichols. Got my Mick passing game backs mixed up.
So that's the kind of play that I'm highlighting as you really don't need that. Yeah. But there's one name I'm...
Uh-oh. What is it? Don't do it.
Do you know who it is?
No. Well, let me guess. How low are we talking?
Low salaried, for sure.
How low salaried?
Lower than Sonny Michelle this week.
Lower than 53?
Yeah. I'm not going to do it.
Oh, Amir Abdullah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Against the Falcons. He's outsnapped Chuba Hubbard in 4 straight games. He played over 50%. Well, I don't go on Twitter.
Nor should you. Especially don't read my tweets, but
a majority of the snaps with McCaffrey leaving early in week 12, bye week to prep. I feel
they like him, I think.
I feel like they know what they have from Chuba Hubbard. If anyone's going to get
Abdullah.
If anyone's going to get heavy receiving work, it's going to be Abdullah. I don't think I have to do it. I don't think it gets me access to enough. But I'm a little bit tempted at least.
Yeah. I don't think I'll do it either, but like it's a good flag. Good to mention it. Okay. Moving to wide receiver. What stands out to you there? I see one thing that stands out to me. Well, I want to see if you flag the same thing.
Is it like a low? Is someone undersalaried?
No. Well, not necessarily over salary, but like a priority for me. It's pretty high salary guy.
Diggs
week, baby. He's back. $8,200 against the Bucks.
I don't think that's egregiously low.
I don't think it's egregiously low, but I think it's appropriate, and I think I'm going to use a lot of him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool with that. His role's gotten a lot better.
Diggs, sideline, touchdown. Whenever I hear his name, the Joe Buck call comes into my head for some reason. Anyway, what else stands out to you at receiver?
Keenan Allen at 76, I think, is creeping up a little bit high.
Still cash game play, but like, that's enough.
So the thing that really jumps out to me is that there's a pretty big teardrop at receiver in terms of salary. We have Tyreek 87, Diggs 82, Lamb 78, Godwin 77, Allen 76, and then nobody else is above 73. And usually, again, like upside is tied to salary. So if we just trust that, then we really got to think things through in terms of salary allocation. Jamar Chase at 72. A Chase Burrow stack is going to be very affordable.
I mean, Higgins is 68. That's pretty affordable too.
I don't think I have to get to Burrow, but I do think that Chase and Higgins will be really good plays in a tight script.
Yep. Amari is 67. Has 10 weeks to get over his
10 weeks.
Sorry, 10 days. To get his conditioning back up from COVID. The mid 6,000 range looks like it's a lot of dudes who are on IR. So I feel like it's a good week to go back to Amari at 67, potentially. Good week to at least monitor him.
Potentially, yeah. The 6,000 range is pretty barren.
Ayuk at 64.
Until we get to Ayuk at 64. I wanted to ask you, speaking of Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin's still 71. Can you see yourself, if you play Dak, if you play Amari, is there enough for you with McLaurin at 71, or is it just a no?
Trying to think of an example of like a guy I used in bringbacks only. Cordero Patterson this past week. I used only in bringbacks, and I didn't have a bringback in every lineup with Tom Brady. I think that would be the McLaurin formula, where I have him at times in lineups with Dak and Amari, but I have, or not Dak and Amari, like with Dak.
Yeah.
But I also have some where I just don't bring it back and I don't use him as a standalone play. I think that's kind of the mold, I would say.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would still consider him, but really not feel like I have to bring it back if I play Dak.
Yeah.
Michael Gallup, 61.
I was going to say that. Yeah. I can get behind that.
Feels like a drop. I know you'll say no outright, and I don't blame you, but Amon-Ra St. Brown has had a bit of a change in his role. I wanted to bring it up, but it wasn't enough. He's been playing like basically 90+% of the snaps the past 3 games. Team high target share, but a very low ADOT. So I'm not there, but like it's important to at least to flag, because rookies specifically, but other players too, will see changes in roles down the stretch, especially for teams that are not playing for anything.
Nah. I think Josh Reynolds at 53 might be better on that team. But I don't want to go to them anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I think Jamison Crowder could get some buzz at 55. I've seen him all over waiver wire articles for this week.
Why?
I don't know.
What has he done? Well, he had 6 targets. Oh boy. Fun. 6 targets from Zach Wilson. Anytime you can get that, can't turn that down. If Daniel Jones were to be cleared and Kadarius Toney were to play, 5,300 is viable there. Would not feel great about it, but I could get behind that.
So I think this is going to be a very similar week to week 13,
Correct.
where we have value at running back. We don't necessarily have to allocate a ton of salary to running back, although we don't have that option as much this week. And the 5,000 range at receiver is quite bleak.
There is The Jags' number 1 wide receiver, Laquan Treadwell, was 51. I'm joking. Please do not use Laquan Treadwell. Just want to make that very, very clear.
When I see him on Red Zone, which is rare, he's wearing the 18. I get flashbacks to Chris Conley, but it's not him.
Oh yeah, he stole his number. They didn't retire it.
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. It's like seeing CEH in 25 on the Chiefs. It's like, this is weird. I don't like this. I'm unsettled. Okay, tight end. A lot of good dudes. I think that Mark Andrews on the bottom end of this range is going to go overlooked because Kelsey's in a great game. Kittle's coming off a huge game. Gronk's in a great game, coming off a huge game. Andrews, the usage, I think he has 10 targets in like 3 of his past 5 games.
9. So starting this past week, 9, 10, 10, 8, 10, 7, 6, 13, 8, 7, 5, 5. So he had basically 5 targets a game to start the season, but it's really been different for him lately.
I want to track sentiment on him this week because he could be a really good pivot for tournaments this week. Where are we at on Dawson Knox at 6,000? Dawson, I'm the one who knocks. Where are we?
I mean, he's oversalaried.
Maybe. I mean, but
he's oversalaried.
Could you include him in game stacks?
Sure.
Okay.
But that's too high of a salary. He needs he needs at least 1 touchdown, potentially 2 touchdowns. He's gotten over
touchdowns he scored last week and in week 4. Sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Jim. Pencil him in for 2 touchdowns.
Just like Mike Gesicki was penciled in for 150 yards, right?
Yeah. But no, he's gotten over 50 yards twice. He can get 17 FanDuel points. It's not really the baseline. Like, he's not on par with those other guys above him. And I don't want to be fooled into thinking that he's in that conversation.
Would you use Foster Moreau at 52 when stacking that Chiefs Raiders game?
His role wasn't as voluminous as I had hoped. That was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
They actually had a pretty high non-garbage time pass rate this week, but it didn't really flow to Moreau.
Yeah.
Which is weird because we had a week without Darren Waller. So this wasn't just a sheer projection. It was like we saw this happen. He was involved the week before too with Waller leaving early and then just was kind of forgotten about.
Yeah.
I think that if so what does he get you really?
I mean, probably what he got you that one week where it's 16 a touchdown, but that's it, where you kind of need the other guys to not do what they can do, basically.
Yeah, and
so you're kind of making like you're doing a short parlay. Like you're shorting all 4 of these guys in a parlay of Kelsey, Kittle, Gronk, and Andrews. I don't think that parlay would hit.
That, but also you're saying, okay, Moreau might get me like a Tyreek mini stack, and I also want to play Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs in that lineup. Other than that, like, there's not a whole lot of salary to allocate. So it's kind of a narrow reason to play someone down at that salary.
Yeah. I agree.
That's just that's my first view of this slate.
Anything else for you at tight end?
No, it's the top guys, and I don't want to get sucked into Evan Ingram.
Jets defense is 3,000. Just throwing that out there. I don't think I'm just saying. I'm just asking questions, Brandon. I'm just asking questions.
They are going to be the optimizer pick of the week.
Boo. Bad. Falcons defense.
They're going to be like third best, where it's enough that every time I see it, I'm like, man, I should just play them.
Falcons are 35. Chiefs are 37. I feel like we'll have low salary defense we can use this week. Browns are 41. Okay. Note to future me. I think we've kind of gone through this already, where it's similar to last week, where pepper that mid-range at running back, take advantage of some guys with roles that are better than their salaries would indicate, and use that salary mostly at tight end. Is that kind of where you're at right now?
Yeah. This week, then we have early on this season, we've had no viable under-salaried running backs. I think we have them this week, so that changes the need to spend top dollar for your running backs, and then instead we can allocate that to tight end, receiver, and quarterback as well.
That's where I'm at too. So I think that digging into the roles of those mid-range guys, deciding how many of them we can lean on and feel good about, and then going from there will be the key for us this week. That is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check, but a lot of stuff coming up this week, of course. Tom Vecchio has you covered with NBA and NHL via the Daily ISO and the Daily Deke right here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Austin Swain is back with UFC as well, PGA coming back after the new year. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. We, of course, are live on YouTube for these Heat Checks as well. Monday at 9 a.m., Thursday at 10 a.m. Hit subscribe there on the FanDuel YouTube page. Get notifications as we go live each and every day. Brandon, if people have questions for you on your favorite media, Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you on your Monday night single game slates. And we'll talk to you once again on Thursday to get you set for week number 14. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.